and welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. I am so grateful that you're here. My name is Kim Menninger, and I'm a women's leadership coach. I started this podcast because as a lifelong sufferer of imposter syndrome and a coach who sees this in 98% of the women I meet, I wanted to take this conversation to a bigger stage, so to speak. Imposter syndrome is triggered by a lot of things, but two of the primary triggers are transitions and feeling different from those around us. Women in traditionally male-dominated environments experience these triggers on an almost daily basis, so it's only natural that we would feel this way. What compounds these feelings is the sense that we are alone. The belief that if we share our feelings, we'll expose our incompetence even further. So we carry it around like a deep, dark secret. I started this podcast because I want to put a stop to this nonsense and destigmatize imposter syndrome. Because we don't talk about it, we look around and assume that everyone around us has it all figured out, that we're somehow the exception to the rule, when in reality, we're all feeling this way. And when we can own that and say it out loud, we all benefit. Nobody more so than you. So thanks again for being here. If you enjoy it, please share it with others who might also benefit. Welcome, Jodie. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today. I'd love to start by having you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate it. This is a great topic that I'm looking forward to sharing on. I'm Jodie Charlop, executive coach and managing partner of a leadership firm called Acceleration Partners. And my coaching work for the last 15 plus years has really been focused on helping people build careers that matter and become leaders that matter. While most of my executive clients are men, because statistically most executives are men, I have a very special passion for coaching women to lead, and through teaching, coaching, and work with women's groups and organizations, I'm on a mission to help women recognize that today's modern leader and our world needs the amazing gifts women bring most authentically. So I'm delighted to talk about this topic and look forward to having this dialogue with you.
I am too. Thank you. And so I want to get us started with my general question that I like to ask, which is, what does imposter syndrome mean to you? And as a follow-on to that, how, if at all, has it shown up for you in your life, your career?
Imposter syndrome for me is that I kind of think of it as that emotional gap or emotional fear that someone's going to find out maybe we don't know what we think we know. It's that confidence gap that we have that somehow we should be all-knowing, and that someone's going to find out that we shouldn't be here, or we haven't earned our right to be here, or that we're a fake. And for me, over the years, I've been very blessed. I got a coach very early in my career. It was and I would say that maybe it was around the whole imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't have the experiences, the background, the stories, and I think it really held me back, as I thought about my own career. And then my coach really helped me see in my own growth. That was before I became a coach. I was in the corporate communications arena. He helped me really understand what leadership was all about. And leadership is not all about being all-knowing. And so I think he really helped educate me, that helped me overcome my own beliefs. And it was really quite life-changing. So not to say today, I always say imposter syndrome is something that's always with us because we're always learning and we're always taking on new things, and the world is always throwing new things at us. But I think how to come out on the other side is recognizing, and the one thing I really love and share with women is we're great learners. So if we go from knowing to learning, we can be fantastic.
I love that. What you just said, go from knowing to learning. And it brings me back to what you were talking about too, about this idea of needing to be all-knowing. And I see that so often in women, and I've certainly experienced it myself. You talked about having a coach that helped you to realize that that's not what leadership is about. Can you tell me more about how you were able to get there? What did that process look like? What are some of the takeaways that you had from that experience?
Well, from my own experience as a coach, I think it's just gaining confidence. I think it's getting back to core. First of all, I always say, know what you're great at and not what you're great at. And at the end of the day, leadership is about coalescing greatness around you. And, if you are thinking you need to know everything, you're playing too small. And that's some of the things that, we had talked about. If you want to have a bigger footprint, go out, have more impact. Leadership is really not about you and what you know. It's about coalescing the team, the org, the community, the world in a way, and you're bringing others' expertise, knowledge, and capability to be bigger. And so it's, again, going from that place of fear to curiosity, that place of knowing to learning, that place of, stress to self-awareness. And it always amazes me that, in particular, I see this more with women than men. My first coach was a male, and he would always say men aren't that complicated. And I have to say, I tend to agree. It really is about knowing that, like a beautiful garden, you have all of these great gifts and skills, and then we really focus on our weaknesses. So it's like we have this beautiful garden with 2 dead plants. But the reality is, all of us have strengths and weaknesses. Everything we have has a strength and a shadow side. And the thing about imposter syndrome, I always say, is imposter syndrome and kind of feelings of doubt actually indicate that you are a great leader. Because I was just watching a movie last night, for example. My husband and I watched The Darkest Hour, which was about Winston Churchill, and a man who had many, many failures. And one of his greatest lines was, "Failure is not fatal." But there was this great scene that talked about the reason he was so troubled, because he didn't have the right answer and he felt fear and doubt. But it was because of that he was a great leader, because great leaders don't know everything. And so anyway, it was just very poignant for me as I was talking to him about that. And I think that's what's really what my coach helped me know and work through it and see. And also, once you cross over to recognizing and giving up that need to know, how much more you can partner, listen, collaborate, be with other people, because you're having a different conversation. You're present with people. You have an inner confidence that I got some stuff, you got some stuff, together our stuff will be even more powerful. And knowing that in itself is a superpower.
You're so right. And you're making me think about, I haven't said this before, but you talked about the strength and the shadow side. I really think imposter syndrome and the way that it shows up disruptively is really the shadow side of humility. But because if we really do believe that we're all knowing, right? Even though that's an unattainable standard, right? If we truly believe that we have it all figured out and we are the ones who can get it done, then we obviously risk leaving out important voices, right? Or
absolutely
seeking input from other people who may have greater expertise in certain areas than we have. So I love what you're talking about as recognizing the partners that can bring complementary skills to the mix. Like you said before, we have a tendency to focus on the dead flowers in our garden, right? So what approaches have you used, either personally or with your clients, to really help people get a better perspective on what those strengths are? Because I find that that's one of the hardest parts of this.
Well, whether you work with a mentor or a coach, I think it's an exercise. I teach a women's leadership course, and we spend a good deal of time on leader identity, kind of really understanding. And this came about because I recognize there's a stage of development in terms of how leaders grow, and in particular, how women grow, and we get stuck in this view of what leadership is. And so, part of it is just getting smart on what's really happening and understanding. And there's some great, matter of fact, Korn Ferry just put out a body of work last year, and Korn Ferry is one of the greatest, one of the national talent management firms, and talking about the skills and gifts needed for the modern leader. And it's fascinating because, as I always say, the true skills that are needed are the ones I see that women are already cultivating more authentically and more naturally. And even in my practice, I see men have a certain set of skills, and we're trying to get them to the skills that women more authentically have, kind of this masculine feminine combination of, that's been enculturated into us. The powerhouse is when we put them both together. But for me, I think it was just really having someone help you own your strengths, like know what you're great at. And there's different ways you can do that, using different assessments, really spending some time in personal reflection to say, darn it, these are my greatest skills and gifts. And the challenge in putting your skills together or your gifts together on your own is the mind is a dangerous neighborhood when it's left alone. And we are a little too close to our intellectual property. I always say, Michael Jordan never thought he was a great basketball player, and he got a lot of negative feedback. And so, when you have a gift, it doesn't feel special to you. So sometimes you need an outsider to help you see how good you are and how great you are, and then help you own it. So, first of all, I think it's just doing some work on knowing my strengths and owning that. And then second, I think we need an emotional champion. I have had a coach in my life for 20 plus years, and doubt is normal and emotions are normal. But whenever I'm stuck in something for more than about 72 hours, I know whenever in doubt, sound it out. Because again, whether it's a coach, my husband, for example, is a fantastic sounding board partner. I'm very blessed to have a really awesome partner. I have a mastermind group. I have coaches. I always have someone that if something's sticking with me, I need to process it to go full circle to get it out on the other side. Because sometimes it's the fear of the unknown or our doubts that hold us back. And so by getting perspective on it, you can move through it with greater grace and opportunity to not let it roadblock you. And so I think, again, having those sounding partners to know your strengths, build your core so you know what your beautiful garden looks like. And, the reality is everyone has strengths and weakness. That's that's why we need teams. That's why we need organizations. We need to bring the best of multiple styles, multiple personalities, multiple ways of working, because that's what we need to have high-performing groups and organizations. So really doing some strengths work, whether you're doing it with a group or a women's program or seeking leadership. There's a lot of great programs out there, but try and do it with a group or an accountability partner or someone who can help you see it, because oftentimes we can't see it in ourselves.
That's a really good point. I think that's very true. It's hard to see ourselves as special because, like you said,
we're just too close to our intellectual property. So,
I like that. I really like that. And obviously, these kinds of strengths reflections, sort of analyzing what we do well, aren't typically embedded in what we do or how we manage ourselves. I find so many people have never done this before. And so I'm sure that's part of the challenge too. Is there anything else that you think environmentally makes it more challenging for us to own our strengths?
Environmentally? Well, I think we get a lot of mixed messages. I mean, particular women, there's so much. One of the reasons why I started moving beyond coaching and teaching a women's leadership course is, in addition to having a mind full of things like challenge. I mean, we have our full unabridged self in our head, right? Like everything from every little thing we did as a little girl to what we did yesterday. So we have this incredible, timeline and data set. And so it in addition to thinking about the strengths and building the core, it's also looking at, people you admire and really thinking about how you want not just what you have, but what you want to be. And so doing that strengths work, I think, is just a critical part, because a lot of times I think the other thing that's a piece of this is we just don't take time to think about ourselves. Oftentimes we're giving so much. We're giving to the workplace. We're getting these mixed signals, and we're trying to do what's right, but there's so much coming at us. It's like, oh, lean in, lean out, be emotional and vulnerable. Don't be emotional. Don't be vulnerable. Be assertive. Don't be too assertive. So we're getting all of these mixed signals, which come from there's just so much coming at us as humans. And, if we try and follow all of this, we're going to be like a tennis ball in a bad tennis match. It's like boom, boom, boom. We're just being batted around. And that's why I think you got to ground yourself in your own inner core. So when the world is kind of saying all these things, you have to grab what matters to you. And it's important we feel grounded in that, because without it, we tend to get batted around by all the external noise in the world. And so that's why I always encourage people to really invest in their leadership. And I was very blessed. Like I said, I did some leadership with various companies, but the deep work that I did was with my coach, and really helped me understand who I was. He helped me understand, and I was, as a matter of fact, I always like to say I was a confused mind, because we also get these mixed signals about what we should be. And so when we began to peel back the onion and look at it, he was really helpful to help me peel away all the things that I had attached that were beliefs about how I should behave, how I should be a leader, all these shoulds, and help me ground to what was really authentic to my own strength, power. And I tell you, after doing that work, my career skyrocketed. My income skyrocketed, my confidence skyrocketed, all around the strengths work of really just diving in and recognizing who I am at the core. And for women, we get so super busy. We're so giving, we're putting out, we're solving it. We get caught in this production trap of life, and we forget to take care of ourselves. And we make our development a second-class citizen in our own worlds. And so, and I always say it's interesting, women will cancel a coaching session 3 to 5 times more often than a man would. I mean, even CEOs that I coach, or, I have a really powerful attorney that I coach, and, I'm like, dude, you got a really important case coming up. You could have canceled it. And he's like, nope, this is my development time. It's amazing to me how men prioritize themselves versus women prioritizing others. And so to do that work, you got to make yourself important and make your growth a priority, and get out of that production trap and make sure you're creating the career and life you want, but that takes you making you a priority.
I think that's really interesting what you mentioned about men, and I'm curious because you said that you work predominantly with men. Are there other similarities and differences that you see in the way that men, I guess in terms of the conversation around confidence, imposter syndrome, how does it show up in men in ways that are similar or different to what we're talking about in terms of women?
Well, the reality is, I think it shows, well, first of all, I think one of women's greatest strengths are they're interrelated, meaning I think it's enculturated to us to watch the system, understand the little nuances, that side of them, and kind of hearing and seeing emotional landscape. That's one of our superpowers. On the flip side, because we see all these connections, they can be it can almost derail us because we see so much. I think men are a little less complicated in that they're much more, I think they simplify things. And the other thing I think just in general is, just thinking about different leaders is just the amount of time before they move on. I think I also do some work in emotional control, and men will feel strong emotions, or they'll feel it, experience it, and they'll move on. Whereas I think processing that sense of connection to the emotion is very different for women. Not all women, I'm generalizing here, but
Sure.
But I do, see that, like just the difference between kind of moving from fear to curiosity, or stress to deep self-awareness, or anxiety to learning, or insecurity to, being okay with asking powerful questions, from conflict to, helping connect things. There's definitely a distinct way, but that's the strength that I think women bring. So I think it's really important that women recognize the things that make us great also hinder us. I think, it's the universal trick that's being played, that coming back to what I said about everything has a shadow side. We have a light and a dark, a helpful way. Doubt is really helpful because it helps us question, are we doing the right thing? But if it's anything in an extreme, becomes a derailer. So it's getting that right modulation between the two. But I think, just in terms of the difference, I think men stay very, they keep it simple and focused, and women tend to take on too much. I think we're trying to strive and achieve, and also because we see so many problems, I think we just overload ourselves, and then we set ourselves up for failure because we can't do it all. We can't have it all. We can't navigate through it all, and then we begin to feel less confident, and we begin to kind of get into this cycle of devalue. There's some great work, by the way, by Dr. Harriet Breaker, who passed away a number of years ago, but these books were written a number of years ago, but they're as relevant. I think of where I was 20 years ago in my career, and I look at young women I'm coaching today, and the mindset hasn't shifted a whole lot. I think there's an illusion that we're making some strides, and we are in many ways, but it's funny to see the core fundamental issues continue to be the same.
Yeah, it is interesting how these trends continue over time. I'm curious too, I think you make some really good points about just the ways in which men simplify, and we tend to take a more complex approach to things. Do you find that men have to do the same kind of strengths work that we're talking about?
Well, yes, I think men, I think we could, work a little more sometimes on humility. I think we could work sometimes on a little less confidence. I think the one thing, and this actually came from a colleague who did a lot of research on this, about, men and women both want to achieve, right, in equal doses. It's a comparable study of, men want to be successful, women want to be successful, right? When it comes to affiliating, men affiliate with people. They need colleagues and relationships. Women need colleagues and relationships. They might do it differently, but they are as collegial and need other people on an equal footing. Men like to learn, women like to learn. The challenge comes that men are much more confident in their learning when they don't know. And there's a lot in the mainstream and research that shows when you provide learning new, men will say, "Oh, well, I've read a book on that," or, "Hey, I've been exposed to that 20%, and I'll learn it." And so they'll go after something with a very light knowledge of it, whereas women think, I have to know it to 80, 90%. I see it all the time. You hear it when people are applying for jobs. And I was working with a client, and she's like, "Well, I'm missing one thing." I'm like, "They need 10 things, and you're missing one thing?" And we tend to dwell again on those dead plants, and that we're not ready. But I always say, the thing that's interesting about women is they're great students. They know how to learn. They have a great strength. They tend to do better in school. They tend to come out of college, much more acclimated to being successful in leadership. And then we get to kind of middle management, and we get into this plateau. Because we don't have a course, or we don't have a curriculum, and we don't have guardrails to kind of tell us where we go. We don't have that prescriptive way. But I said, growth is an independent study, and if you can learn, you can be great. You just have to reframe that you're learning. And so whenever somebody comes in, I have a woman that's up for a very high-level role, and she said, "I just don't know if I'm ready." And I'm like, well, the only way you're going to be ready is to go be ready, because to get that experience, you got to give yourself 90 days or 6 months to learn it. They're hiring you for the gifts you have. Every new leader, every new CEO, every new division head, every new VP, every new director, every new leader from producer to leader, we got to learn the ropes. And like in college, you didn't know anything on your first day of class. And by the end of the semester, you felt more knowledgeable, confident. You got a high grade. And women, it's just fascinating to me. We think we have to be baked coming out of the box. But the reality is, I said, if I could promise you in 90 days or 6 months, you would know everything you need to know, would you feel differently? And then they say, well, yeah. And then I would say, well, what is it? Why do you not think in the next 90 days or 6 months you could not get everything you know to do this job effectively or be effective in this role? As a matter of fact, not knowing is a gift because you go in fresh. You are able to move forward with grace. You can listen more because you're not all knowing. One of my greatest stories is a woman that I coached who, as part of the leadership program, one of the reasons why they used to do, and we don't do them as much anymore, these leadership rotation programs in companies, is because they want to put you in roles that you don't have any technical knowledge. Why? They don't want you to be subject matter experts. They want you to be a leader. And if you don't have any knowledge about the expertise, then you just have to go in and listen and coalesce and be a leader. And one of my greatest clients was one of the first women on a nuclear sub, and they put her on a sub with 40 guys, and she didn't know anything about running a nuclear sub, and ended up getting high marks and respect because she said I had to rely on what they knew and allow them to be the experts in their field, and my job was to make sure they had the resources they need to be successful, not be the person that runs a nuclear sub. So it's I always love that story because that's life every day. We're walking into new things. We can't be all knowing.
I can only imagine the level of imposter syndrome that woman must have faced on day one.
Absolutely. But she's like, it was a great learning experience because I realized that I had 40 teachers and I was the leader, but that in itself is a great opportunity for servant leadership, to listen, learn, and be bold, and to really leverage that relationship to understand what people need of you and what you need of them. And so I always say, one of the things I always say, men and women, I always say, when you step into a role, the first thing we need to do is fire your knowledge. I know you got promoted because you're knowledgeable. Now let's fire your knowledge, because now you've got to build leadership in others, and that means you got to step out of the limelight and allow your leaders to grow. And it's paradoxical because we've used our knowledge to get up to a certain level, and now, I can't use it. So again, I think it's kind of the leadership trick that every time we move up a level, we have to almost forget what we knew and open our mind to operating paradoxically in an opposite mindset.
I love that. I love that takes us back to the definition of leadership in the first place, right? And if we can reframe that in our own minds, we take so much of the pressure off of ourselves.
Oh my God, yes.
Wow, this has been so great. I have a couple of wrap-up questions for you. What motivated you to want to tell your story today, and what are you hoping people take away from it?
Well, what motivated me to connect with you is we just have so much work to do for women, in helping them grow, and leadership in general. Look, I love the role that I play in coaching men because from privilege to bias, I think I play a strong role in being a conduit and helping my male clients see the world with a clear set of glasses of what's happening in the marketplace. And certainly with what's going on in our country, and, we got a lot of work to do from a leadership standpoint. So, but for women, it's just that we need to do extra work to really help women get good, like today's discussion. I hope they'll take away that, imposter syndrome is normal. When you feel it, it's not a negative. It is part of you growing as a leader. But when it holds you back, when it doesn't allow you to step into your potential for yourself, your team, your org, when it steals your courage, it's time to find a partner or an emotional group, and I'm not talking about just an emotional support group, but I mean a leadership circle or something that can help you, a partner that can help you recognize that what you're feeling is normal and there's something really powerful and positive on the other side. And so if I could help, if one woman listens today and stands in her power and is able to, move from fear to curiosity, to move from, again, that insecurity to say, hey, let me lean into knowing your expertise and valuing you as a human and asking really smart questions, then I will feel that I've made some contribution to your audience.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure others will too.
Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing. We do have a lot of work to do, and if we band together, we have a lot more power than we think we do. We can vote with our mind. We can vote with our actions. We can vote politically. We're seeing more women moving into politics than ever, which is awesome, because if we're going to change the world, we got to step into it. So the more we can gain the tools, the mindset, the skill set to move forward. The Dalai Lama once said, the world will be saved by the Western woman. And it will be interesting to see the leaders in this post-COVID world, as with the financial crisis, how women bring their leadership in powerful ways to lead others forward. And I am very hopeful that if we're going to create a world that you and I want to live in, I think we need more women to help us get there.
Amen to that.
Thanks again for listening today. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome and you'd like additional support, check out the show notes for more resources or contact me directly. I would love to help you. And if you'd like to tell your story, I would love to interview you. You will find my contact info in the show notes, so reach out anytime. Thanks again.